a lot of my patients have really dealt with the issue of rejection, and it's kept them in a place of being unhealthy for many, many years.
I don't find too many people who know who they are in God.
The way the enemy works starts out with the rejection, and then the enemy will come back and twist it and come back with the things that you want to hear.
Yeah.
Like the deception is so deep.
There's very little joy, very little joy right now. And there's a lot of hopelessness and a lot of stress. And a lot of it's coming because of the social media.
Joy isn't always like, hey, I'm happy, right? Joy is this deep, deep feeling and knowing that we're good and we are in a good place with our Creator and that we're not pretending.
Isn't it sad? It's like we're on this vicious, like a hamster wheel. We're all going round and round and round, and we're judging them. They're judging us. And what a waste of our time.
You're listening to the Visibly Fit Podcast. Hey, I'm your host, Wendie Pett. And every week, I'll give you holistic, practical solutions for everyday issues related to nutrition, healing, functional fitness, and behavior modifications. As a natural path fitness expert and wellness coach for over 20 years, my goal is to empower you to reach for greater health and to rise up to your next level of living in mind, body, and spirit. You were created with greatness in mind. It's time to own it. Are you with me? Then let's dive in.
Hello and welcome to the Visibly Fit Podcast. I'm your host, Wendie Pett. So good to spend this time with you today. Hope you're doing amazing. Listen, have you ever dealt with rejection? I know I have. It is not fun. And I know you know the feelings that come with rejection. In fact, there are some immediate and long-term effects that can affect your mental and your physical health. And a couple of those things are just emotional responses, right? I know you felt it. You felt the sadness or the anxiety or even maybe a little angry after experiencing rejection. It is a tough thing to deal with. But also physiologically, your body responds to rejection with stress reactions. I mean, your heart rate can race, you get elevated blood pressure, and the release of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline take place. And they're not regulated. And so that can cause some issues with weight gain and depression, all kinds of things, right? And so rejection does more than what we realize it does. But if we continue in this rejection kind of place, man, it can affect us for years and years and years. So we've got to know, how do we get on the other side of rejection? And how do we handle it with God's eyes instead of our own, right? A lot of times we aren't being rejected. It's maybe our ideas, or maybe it's not even about us. It's about the person that rejected us, right? But it still hurts, right? You can still feel the feeling. And then sometimes it makes us want to go into isolation, and even that loneliness kicks in, and then that affects our health. It can affect your cognitive behavior, especially if you're in kind of a place of loneliness and not wanting to be around people. I mean, it's been said that it can exasperate and kind of push people to more in that dementia state and Alzheimer's state. Yeah, that's right. Or if it's, years over years of being lonely and not feeling a part of a tribe, it's really a tough thing to deal with. But I want to talk about this today. I have a guest on, and her name is Patty LaRoche, and she is just a lovely lady. I'm going to share her bio here with you. She is a wife and mother of 3 and stepmother of 2. She's a grandmother of 9 and a great-grandmother of 4. Wow, she does not look like a great-grandmother. You go, Patty. Anyway, she has been married to Dave, who is a former professional baseball player, coach for over 51 years. And her 3 sons followed in their father's footsteps, and all were drafted into professional baseball. Wow, what a legacy. That's so cool. And one remains in the game today. After retiring from teaching high school, she taught speech and theater and debate and, oh, wow, even forensics. That's amazing. Patty speaks professionally and writes a weekly religious column for 3 area newspapers. In her spare time, she plays tennis and pickleball. Oh, I should have talked to her about that. I love me some pickleball. She reads a lot. She hangs out with her family and friends, and she roots for the Kansas City Chiefs, and I won't hold that against her, and thinks about exercising. Get that? She thinks about it. She thinks about exercising. That's funny. Patty has been certified to speak on the evils of sex trafficking, a fight that her son Adam entered when he quit professional baseball. Patty recently presented a TEDx talk on the rewards of rejection. And she published a book, her first book, and we're going to be talking about that today. And it's called A Little Faith Lift, Finding Joy Beyond Rejection. It's a humorous Christian book with a serious message, which addresses people who spend their lives trying to measure up. Does that sound anything like you? Do you ever say, am I good enough? Have you ever said that before? You might want to read this book. She believes that laughter covers a multitude of humiliating experiences. Oh boy. It's great medicine. Yes, it is. And she should know. And so we are going to dive right in and hear all about her book and hear a little bit about why she's got this passion about writing about rejection. Enjoy the show. Well, welcome, Patty LaRoche, to the Visibly Fit Podcast. It's so awesome to have you here.
Thank you so much, Wendie. It is my pleasure to be here. I'm excited to share some of the things that I've learned, and I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot from you as well. So thank you for having me.
Well, I brought you on because, most of my listeners know that Visibly Fit is so much more than just nutrition and exercise. It's about mindset and emotional health and well-being and all the things that keep us on a healthy track for living the way in which God intended for us to live. And you wrote a book called A Little Faith, Faith, A Little Faith Lift, Finding Joy Beyond Rejection. Mm-hmm. And before we hopped on here, I was talking about how a lot of my patients have really dealt with the issue of rejection, and it's kept them in a place of being unhealthy for many, many years. So let's first talk about, why did you write this book, and why this is kind of just this longing to help women through rejection?
Well, a lot of it is I grew up very poor. And my father died when I was 8 months old, and my mother was pregnant when he died, and I had a brother a year older. So anyway, my mother worked minimum wage her entire life. And I just remember not fitting in because I didn't have the cool clothes, and I never went on a vacation. We couldn't go on a vacation. And so there was always just this little stigma that I wasn't quite good enough. And of course, I didn't label it as that when I was younger. I just tried various ways to be a little funnier, to be prettier, which didn't work out, to do whatever I could.
Stop.
To make, no, I mean, but in middle school, that was a whole different,
I got you.
That was a different baby. And it was just so important.
Those are those awkward years anyway.
Oh, they're horrible.
For most people.
And I write about them in my book because I have so many stories. And especially as a teacher, when I really delved into the lives of my students and found out how many of them were just overcome by middle school rejection experiences. And I remember just being so alarmed at some of the things that they shared with me. I mean, I remember one of the stories, I taught debate, and a bunch of my female debaters wanted to have a sleepover at my house. And I said, no. They said, no, you need to have one. I went, no, really, I don't. But they did. They came anyway. And so, but they began talking.
That means you're a pretty cool teacher if they want to have a sleepover at your house.
I had fun. I had a lot of fun. But they started talking about, in middle school, this is actually in my book, that there was a time they were in the popular group, and the popular group would kick one person out a week. And that person then had to sit on a bench and couldn't walk them home from school, couldn't talk to them. We didn't have cell phones at the time, of course. But they just talked about how horrible that experience was. Well, last year I was talking to one of my youngest son, who's in his 40s. And I started talking about that experience, and he said, Mom, don't you remember when that happened to me in middle school? And I said, no. He said, you're kidding. He said, I came home, and he's a professional athlete, so he's a pretty tough guy. And he said, I was sobbing at the kitchen table because it was my week to be rejected. And I just felt terrible. I said, oh my gosh, I have no memory of that, Andy. I'm so sorry. And he said, but then when he went back and his cousin was to be the one ousted the next week, Andy said, we're not doing this anymore. Like, we're done with this. And for some reason, people listen to him. But in the girls' case, the ones that were sharing their stories, nobody stopped it. And I just thought, oh my gosh, this is just cruel. I mean, I don't understand, you hear the mean girl syndrome. I'm sure as a counselor, you've dealt with that a lot. but it sets off these labels and these patterns. And in my life, middle school was very damaging to me. So I went on, of course, and, did well in high school and found my niche in theater and debate, not in cheerleading, which is where I wanted it to be, because that would really mean I was somebody. But God took me a very different direction. And then in college, I debated and then went on to meet, my husband is a professional athlete, only to find that even in that world, I didn't measure up.
I was going to ask you about that because
I didn't.
Being a professional athlete's wife and that whole circle, I was immediately going to say, okay, how did that work out?
No.
Especially coming from the false belief system that you had already in place.
Yes.
So how'd you work through it?
It was very hard. It was very hard. In the opening chapter of my book, I talk about one of the most embarrassing things that ever happened to me when my husband was with the New York Yankees. And we were a little older. We had children. Most of the young wives were just getting into money. We weren't. And so the diamonds were getting bigger. The mink stoles were getting prettier. The cars were fancier. And I think we were driving a Honda Civic or something. I mean,
good for you, Patty. I'm sorry, but good for you.
I know. I'm going to look at it now. And I see God had this plan to have this book to let people know that we really never get to the point, if we're going to live for what we think we need to be instead of what God thinks we need to be, we're not going to get there, because there's always
can't compare.
The measuring rod just gets higher and higher and higher. So I just quickly found out that that I wasn't as good or as pretty. And interestingly, I don't even have this in my book. When my husband was with the Yankees, in 1 year alone, he got sent down. It's AAA. It's the level right below the big leagues. He got sent down 5 times. So we went down and up and down and up and down and up. And at that time, I just had 2 little kids, but I was dragging them back and forth between New York City and Columbus, Ohio. And of course, all those wives in New York were bonding and having all these experiences. And I just never fit in.
Very cliquey.
Oh my gosh, yes. So anyway, that was it just was a confirmation that this is, you can't put your, I hope I measure up eggs in that basket, because there's no basket big enough, except for what God
Patty, I think it's interesting that you would bring that up, and I was going to ask you about that, because it just happens all the time. We had a situation here in our neighborhood where someone had a new idea of an event or something to do, and everyone kind of, nixed it. And then so you feel rejected, but they're just rejecting the idea, not you. But it's almost like the pecking order. Like it goes back from the beginning, like kind of tribal, you know what I mean? Like it's definitely the pecking order of leaders. And it's very fascinating and interesting when you see the psychology of it, right?
I guess that's,
but it still hurts is what I'm trying to say.
It's very painful.
Right.
And one of the things that surprised me, Wendie, was when I was teaching high school, every year, my juniors in the speech class, we were trying to learn, how do you communicate with everybody? Gender, sex, age, whatever. And so we would go to the nursing home and play bingo with the elderly people.
I love that.
So they would learn how to talk to them. And then we would go to the kindergartners. And my student would be paired one-on-one with a kindergartner. And they would go out in the courtyard and they would ask them questions that they had planned ahead of time and write the answers. And then we'd go back to the classroom. And so for years, I compiled these answers, and they were just delightful. How old do you think I am? Oh, I think you're 214. Their answers were just so fun, because but to them, they knew everything. And when my student would ask them, can you dance? They would jump up, and the little girls would, do their pirouettes, and the little boys would try to do the moonwalk. And of course,
didn't care what people thought.
They didn't care. Yeah. The kindergartners didn't care at all. And then what my students didn't know was that 2 weeks before that, I had asked them questions in the classroom, questions to which I knew the answers. Can anybody in here play the violin? No eye contact. No one even, and I had the first chair violinist in my front row. Can anybody in here spike a volleyball? Again, I had a star volleyball player. Can anybody write a book? I asked questions that I knew they could do, that they had been successful at. They would not admit that. So when we came back to the classroom, Wendie, I said, we went over the answers. We were laughing at some of the cute little kids. I said, okay, let's go back 2 weeks when I ask you these questions. do you remember that none of you had the confidence to say that you could do something that I knew you could do and you have been successful at? So what's the difference between a 5-year-old and a 17-year-old? What's happened? And it opened up amazing dialogue for them to share these experiences of being told that they weren't good enough, either by a coach or a parent or a pastor or a youth counselor. It doesn't matter. A lot of damage was actually done by our high school counselor, who just told people, you're never going to be able to do that. So that's what
the
really...
power of words, right?
Oh my gosh. And that I didn't have one student in that classroom who was able to say, I'm okay. I can do that. Not in a cocky way, but just I have that ability. Or even to say, God's given me the ability to do that, which I knew was the case. And I had Christians in the classroom. It's just like, we've lost something between when the youth of a 5-year-old and where we get to when we survive middle school and get into high school. And it just broke my heart to see that.
So, yeah, I mean, it is heartbreaking. And, it's the beauty of, faith like a child, right? It's like we need to keep faith like a child and have that childlike spirit. And so often just the heaviness of life gets in the way. And then the rejection just kind of continues to harden our heart and harden our minds to really who we are in Christ, right?
Yes.
And so I think about that and how disheartening it is. And we've all been a part of it. Like we've all been rejected, and we'll probably continue to be rejected in some way or another. So it's, how do we respond in a healthy way? How do we get our mind set and think of who we are in Christ, and more on kingdom minded, as opposed to, I mean, you look at social media, my goodness. I mean, you didn't have that when you were growing up. I didn't either. I can't imagine how it'd be if I had social media. So I think of these young kids now and that feeling of rejection, and it's still there, but it's different. People aren't telling you so much, or maybe they are, but you're seeing it, or they just kind of ghost you or whatever it is. I don't know all the terminology.
No, and it's done a lot of damage.
Right.
It has its benefits, but I'm afraid that in that arena of, I'm a teenager, or I'm in my 20s, even in their 70s, though, I'm meeting people even in their 70s who are telling me stories about, I wish I could go back and know that none of this stuff matters. Living on a farm should not have embarrassed me like it did. I mean, I just talked to a lady the other day, and she said, but I let that define me. And I look back now and think there was nothing wrong with that. And I have a granddaughter who's just loves the Jesus with all her heart, but she's very confident in what Jesus is doing in her life. And so she's come back from college now, and she just wants to get a cow, and she has her little garden, and she's knitting, and she's sewing, and she's teaching people how to make cheese. And I mean, she's just this really cool gal.
Yeah.
But she knows who she is. Yeah. But I keep telling her, you're a rarity. You're a rarity that you're not sitting there saying, oh, I have to I have to dress a certain way to be cool and wear the right shoes and the right clothes. And she doesn't think that way. But I said, but I don't find too many people who know who they are in God. That's what my book really focuses on. There's one sentence in the book. Well, I think I repeat it a few times. God is the audience that counts. And so,
audience of one. Yeah.
In the little faith lift, I go through several times talking about, what does God say about you? And really, he created you. He put that unique DNA in you. He made you just the way he gifted you in a certain way. Don't seek other people's gifts. Look at yours and develop them and make them better, but don't be envious and jealous and striving all the time. And when you go to bed at night, can you say, God, I pray I pleased you, instead of, I sure pray I pleased, my snooty little neighbor here who always tries to make me feel inadequate. I mean, and we also have to define who's important to us, that it matters what they think, instead of just anybody on social media who says something and we buy into it, and it's very defeatist. Yeah. Yeah,
it is. And we know that, we're to love the Lord with all of our heart, mind, and soul. And then we're supposed to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. And so if we don't love ourselves, how can we love our neighbors? And so it's got to be like this connection with the Lord, our,
Yes.
our maker, to fully understand that, oh, okay,
Yes.
I love me like you love me, and therefore I can love others the way you do, and start to love them in the way that they would want to be loved through the Lord, not through how we would want to love them. Does that make sense?
And because they're hurting too.
Right. Right.
Everybody
None
has
of
that.
us.
No.
Yeah.
No.
None of us escape.
No.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I love that you have a heart for women that are hurting and have fallen prey of rejection. Again, everyone has had some sort of rejection. I can remember my very first time. It was on the playground in first grade. So like, I do remember, like, it's those early moments that really just implant their little,
Yes.
thing in your mind and in your heart. And if you don't let that go and forgive and release and do the heart work, it can stick with you for a long time.
And sadly, what we're seeing, my middle son played professional baseball for 12 years, and then he left that field to go into the fight against sex trafficking. And so I have become certified to speak on sex trafficking, and then have actually spoken to schools about it and met young girls and boys who talk about how they get involved online with someone because that person makes them feel better about themselves. I mean, that's obviously a very real, very serious consequence of not feeling good enough. And so a principal at another school just called me last week, and he said, I've got this situation, and do you think this is bad? And it was some little girl. The mother had come in the office just bawling because she looked on her phone, and there were these comments. This little girl was saying, I'm not pretty enough. I'm not popular, and all this stuff. And then the predator was telling her, oh, but I think you're beautiful, feeding into that. And they were getting ready to make plans to have an arrange some meeting somewhere. And
very
of course,
scary.
That's the beginning of the end. But this isn't just a matter that we can say, oh, well, it's just life. It can be very, very serious when you take it to that extreme.
Right.
You're just
but Patty, isn't it interesting? I mean, just think of the way the enemy works, right?
Oh.
Starts out with the rejection, and then the enemy will come back and twist it and come back with the things that you want to hear.
Yeah.
Like the deception is so deep. And so we have to open our eyes and see and help to educate and mentor these young girls, right? And really help them know who they are in Christ, and to be bold in their faith, but be bold and being comfortable with who they are and not try to be somebody else. Like, I love that you said it was your daughter, right?
My granddaughter.
Your granddaughter.
My granddaughter,
that's right.
yes.
And that she's so good at age 20 something. And I think that's awesome.
It is awesome.
I think that is more beautiful than someone trying to pretend to be someone they're not.
It is.
And people can tell. People can feel it. They know.
Yeah.
And it's exhausting too. If you're always trying to be someone you're not. Oh my goodness.
It is. Did I measure up today? How did I do?
Yeah.
We have this grading scale. I think I faked him out pretty well today. Somebody said they liked my makeup today. Oh, that's a good day. And it's just so false and phony. And you just see the enemy at work through all of that, because God's just saying, stop, please, look at me, because I'm telling you, you are perfect. You're forgiven. Your mercies are new every morning, God. And so we just have this opportunity to be joyful. But you know what, Wendie? I'm sure you're seeing this in counseling. All my counselor friends are seeing it. There's very little joy. Very little joy right now. And there's a lot of hopelessness and a lot of stress. And a lot of it's coming because of the social media arena.
All media. Yeah.
All media. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So,
and it's just one of those things that, we know the verses in the Bible, joy comes in the morning, and count it all as joy. And the strength of the Lord is my, what is it? I'm messing up. Is my joy. Anyway, whatever. I'm messing that one up. But joy comes from the Lord. But it's like, okay, joy isn't always like, hey, I'm happy, right? Joy is this deep, deep feeling and knowing that we're good and we are in a good place with our Creator, and that we're not pretending. And that feels joyful. in the midst of the chaos and the tough stuff of this world, you can still have joy.
And there's a real peace with that joy.
Yeah.
And people are looking for that. And when they see it, and it's like they're going, "What? So how are you so upbeat in the middle of these circumstances?" It's Jesus, I mean,
Right.
it's Jesus.
That's it.
And so that's the only answer, because they're all looking for some answer to give
Right.
them that kind of hope and that kind of peace and joy. Yeah.
Well, and that's where a lot of my patients go towards food, right? It's that counterfeit comfort. And they think that that'll bring them joy in the moment. I mean, it is in the moment and that's it. And it's very fleeting, but they go to other things, whether it's alcohol or over shopping and spending, or just like you were talking about these ladies with all the diamonds and furs. That doesn't make you happy, It's and I was thinking about these young girls that wanted to come to your house and spend the night. You think they wanted to go to the gal that was running the cheerleading squad to her house? I don't know, but I'm just saying they saw you and could tell that you're the real deal. And that's what people want. They want authenticity. They want someone that's going to love them and speak truth to them. And that's what you did for these young girls. And the impact that you've made on them is huge, I'm sure.
It's been really exciting, Chris. Now I'm old enough to be, I mean, I'm way, way, way older than I was when I was teaching, and I still run into them sometimes, and they'll talk about it and what it meant, and just that there was a listening ear. I wasn't always great. Sometimes I'd be cranky and irritable, and
Oh, you mean you're human? Okay.
Yeah.
No, but they could trust you, and I think that's beautiful, and that you weren't going to pretend to be someone you're not. And so that's a big deal.
I think one of the biggest learning curves for me was when I had 8 of the high school senior girls come to me and ask if I would lead a Bible study in my home for them to find out who they were in Jesus. And they were Christian girls, but they wanted a deeper walk. And so we would have Taco Tuesday at my house, and they'd come every Tuesday night and curl up in the living room, and we would talk. But and this was huge in my book. This all became kind of an impetus for me writing this story about rejection, because what I was so shocked about was how little they felt about themselves. And they were the popular girls in the high school. They were the cheerleaders and the homecoming queens and the, lead in the musical and blah, 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 blah. They were all that. But when you talk to them, none of them felt good enough. And I will never forget, they shared one night how they hated to even walk down the hall in the school building, because kids that were lined up at their lockers, they felt like they were watching them, and they never felt like they were okay. And they felt like they were being judged. And I said to them, you guys, I mean, I've been there, done that, and probably still am to some extent. But do you understand that those kids lining those hallways are looking at you saying, "Oh my gosh, that's the head cheer. Oh my gosh, that's the star of the volleyball," whatever. And wanting to be, isn't it sad? It's like we're on this vicious, like a hamster wheel. We're all going round and round and round, and we're judging them. They're judging us. And what a waste of our time. When you think so little of yourself. And then when I ask them, what would you like to change about yourself? Oh my gosh. Oh, my forehead's too big. My nose is too, I'm just looking at, and it was so sad to me though, but it was also this eye opener, and it made me go back as a better teacher and really focus on those things in the classroom to increase self-worth.
That's so
to let
good.
those people know how amazing they were, wherever they were, whatever they were going through. So anyway.
That's so good. Well, you look at the younger girls that are getting all kinds of plastic surgery now, and you're like, what are you doing? You're absolutely beautiful. What are you thinking? And again, it's that lack of self-worth, and it's really tough. Now, you did a TEDx talk talking about the rewards of rejection.
Yes.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the rewards that you can have from rejection?
Sure. I talked about, first of all, you can learn humility. That's that was really big. And I talked about when I was in 7th grade, and my girlfriends convinced me to go over it and walk across the dance floor and ask Float to dance with me. And
is that a real name?
Yeah, well, that's what everybody called him. I honestly don't even know his really, but I
he must have been a good dancer. He could float across the dance floor.
No, he really wasn't.
Oh no, okay.
I'm not like no, because he told me no. in front of all of his friends, and they all started laughing. And so years later, I was sharing that story with my husband, and it's really quite comical because he just stared at me and he went, a guy named Float didn't want to dance. Oh, like, oh my gosh, it can't get much worse than that. And I went, that's not the point. That's not the point of the story. But anyway, I talked about that in my TED Talk, but I talked about how all those experiences, they were humbling. But we're told to be humbled. We are told not to think of ourselves bigger than we really are. So that can be a plus. Another plus is that we will learn who our friends are, because especially with the social media thing, and I think it's real important that we defend our friends and we stick up for people, because it's really hard to stick up for yourself. And I talked about a gal, I would talk about bullying a lot, and most of my students had been bullied in one form or another. And I kept saying to them, you know what, you've just got to know who you are, so that when you're being bullied, you can say, what pleasure are you getting out of trying to make me feel bad about myself? And then just leave it at that. And so one little girl, and I said, but you need to do it for other people too when they're being bullied. So the next one of my classes, a little girl ran in before school started. Mrs. LaRoche, I have to tell you, and she's, I think, a sophomore in high school. What happened yesterday? She said, I was on the school bus, and this 12-year-old was making fun of this little 6-year-old, and the 6-year-old was crying. And I remembered what you said, and I got out of my seat, and I went over to the 12-year-old, and I said, why are you trying to make her feel bad about herself? She said, I couldn't remember the exact words to say, but I said something like that. And she said, the bully told me to blank off and had a lot of ugly things to say to me. But she said, but I felt so good about myself. But then that night, the phone rang, and it was the bully's mother. And the bully's mother told me that I had no business telling her daughter what she could or couldn't say, that she had every right to call. Oh, my word. And so we had an amazing
bullies breed bullies.
Yes.
Hurt people. Yeah,
and I write about that as well. But anyway, I repeated that for years, that story, and how when someone is being bullied, we've got to stand up for them. We've got to be the one, because it's so hard for them to do it for themselves.
Yeah.
So
anyway, so true. So true. Well, we've lost. There you are. There you are.
I'm sorry. Yes, my low battery just came on, so I'm clicking it off.
We better wrap up this interview.
Okay, sorry.
Well, listen, I really appreciate you coming on, and I love that you again have this passion to help young girls and even women of any age, just find the rewards and rejection, but also to have a little faith lift, right? And to find the joy beyond the rejection. Yes. Because that's the ticket. Find the joy beyond rejection, break through it all, and not stay stuck in that, because it does affect our health. It really does. So thank you, Patty, for your time. Where can people go and get your book?
Well, they can go to Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, Target. Okay. Yes.
Perfect.
That's great. Thank you, Wendie, for what you do.
You're welcome.
I mean, gosh, boy, you got your work cut out for you right now, don't you?
Well, you know what? I love women especially, but I love seeing people get freed and get healthy and well, like fully healthy and well, not just physically, right? But here and seeing that breakthrough is just so rewarding. So I feel like it's an honor that I get to do what I get to do. So thank you again for all you do, and
thank you.
Appreciate you. And y'all go to Amazon or wherever and go get A Little Faith Lift by Patty LaRoche. So anyway, have a great one. God bless you.
Thanks, Wendie.
Thank you.
Too.
Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
You too. Okay. Bye-bye.
Well, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Visibly Fit Podcast. I hope you enjoyed that. Patty is just a delight, isn't she? Gosh, so much fun. Check out her book, A Little Faith Lift. I think that you will find the humor in what she is sharing about finding joy beyond rejection. And also, it's a serious issue, and we want you to be healed and freed up from the painful past, or maybe even the painful moments of rejection. And if you are on a mission to get healthy and well in mind, body, spirit, and emotions, you know where to go. Go to wendiepett.com and check out any of my free resources there, or join us on the 7-week Visibly Fit Accelerator course. And that is at getvisiblyfit.com. And that's where we go after your nutrition and your exercise routine, your sleep, your stress, all of the lifestyle habits that might not be playing out so well, maybe because of past rejection. And we even address a lot of those issues as well. So make sure you go there and get signed up. Let's get you started right away and get a handle on your health and your well-being once and for all. Let's get you in your best shape possible. Mind, body, spirit, emotions. You deserve it. All right. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Visibly Fit. We will catch you next time. Be blessed.
Well, that's a wrap for today's show. So thank you so much for tuning in. I love spending this time with you. To learn more and get more free resources, just head on over to wendiepett.com. And thank you in advance for sharing this episode and this podcast, following and subscribing not only to this podcast, but finding me on social media, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you are, I'm probably there too. Until next week and our next podcast time together, make it a visibly fit day.